DeRae, episode 4. You ready?
Yes, let's do it.
Roll the intro. What's up, everyone? This is Austin Staton here with DeRae Crane, and this is episode 4 of Cautious Coffee. We thank you for sticking around so far through 3 episodes. And DeRae, I think this officially makes you a podcaster now. 4 episodes in the bank.
I mean, what are we shooting for? 100 here? 100?
Minimum 100.
Yeah, 100 before we start to care or get sad that no one's listening.
It was actually kind of funny that you mentioned nobody listening. So we have been, first off, like really enthusiastic about all the support that we've had, whether it's on, the social media platforms or even TikTok. We've posted like 3 or 4 videos on TikTok, and I think we've got like over 1,000 views. That's amazing. But in terms of, it's interesting to look at the numbers that we've had from like video plays versus like audio plays. And it just shows that like people consume media completely differently. Each person's different. And one of our former colleagues and a listener of the show, Matt Cobb, actually texted me after the first episode, and he said, "Did you guys meet your listenership goal?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." He's like, "That's awesome. What was your target?" I said, "We just wanted somebody to listen, just one person." We had more than one person listen, so yeah, we met our goal. So we're not going to set any numbers on how many people listen to this episode. We just hope that we can impact like one person along the journey. I think that's kind of our take on it.
We don't do it for the applause. How about that?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
But if you want applause or leave a iTunes review, we would totally appreciate that.
Absolutely. Or suggest a topic for us to discuss or ask us questions. We're here for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And today's topic is actually coming from a contributor, RB McKeon. She's based out in Washington State, and she's actually joining us on our Zoom line right now. So we are recording this episode probably about a week and a half prior to when you were listening to this episode. And one of the things that we're doing is our Patreon supporters and our Slack channel supporters, we're inviting them to join us for the live recording. So, they can contribute to the episodes, whether it's a topic or even a discussion, and maybe ask questions live on air. So we're hoping to hear from RB today, but if not, RB is definitely contributing through this topic. And if you want to, of course, follow our work, we encourage you, visit our website, cautiouscoffee.com. It's got everything you need, the links to the shows, links to the social media platforms, and I don't know, maybe DeRae will join us on social media. Are you back on social media now, or what's the status?
You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram, I suppose.
There you go. So find him there. He's not on TikTok yet. Not on TikTok.
I will never be on TikTok. I will
never say never.
You're right.
I mean, technically your first video on TikTok. So we posted Fear Not Getting a Vote on TikTok, and I think it had like 700 views, like 70 or 80 like likes and upvotes. So, man, that's a pretty good ratio.
It is. It's
a pretty good debut.
I mean, it's got good traction there.
I mean, you're no Charlie D'Amelio or Addison Rae, and DeRae shaking his head like I have no clue who they are.
Yeah, I'm just some guy.
Yeah, just some guy with a rice hat, but that's about it. I mean, anyways, DeRae, today's topic, enough. How do you know when something is enough? That you've tolerated it enough, that you've worked hard enough or long enough, that it's good enough? Is anything ever enough? Do we mindlessly chase to get to this abstract idea of enough? What happens when my enough doesn't look the same as your enough? Am I enough? Who decides?
This sounds like a question from RB. It's a total RB
100%.
Question. And for the listeners, RB is one of those women that when I first met her, I liked her. I think everyone probably thinks that when they first, or maybe they don't. I don't know. But I knew I did. And she's one of my favorite people. So thank you so much for the question, RB. Enough.
It's an interesting.
It's a deep one.
Conversation.
Yeah, it's a deep one.
I mean, let's start off because you alluded to this in the last episode about your boxing career, and we don't want to dive into your like wins, losses, and that kind of thing. But you boxed for 20 years.
Yep, that's something people don't do, and people don't have amateur boxing careers.
Man. I mean, concussions, all that. But you had a goal, getting to the Olympics. Didn't work out. But instead of like hanging on, trying for 2020, you decided, all right, it's time for me to move on. You went into the workforce, you moved to Texas, started an MBA. When did you know that enough was enough?
I knew that my shelf life was, it was about to expire. I had 3 surgeries leading up to the 2016 Olympic team trials. Had a torn latissimus dorsi that took me out for 6 weeks or so, and a surgery, a piece on each of my AC joints took me out another 6 weeks. And then I had a dislocated toe, so I knew I was in trouble. And my primary focus was just staying healthy enough to be able to compete. And I knew that this was going to be my last run, but at no time did I think that I wouldn't make it. And I was willing to go and see if I could do it, if I could overcome those obstacles. But as far as knowing when it was enough, I don't think enough people, especially in a sport like boxing or football, you see it all the time, right? You see folks that hang on a little too long, and I didn't want to be that person because I understand trade-offs. And you mentioned CTE earlier, and there is no way. I understand that I made that trade-off. Brain cells gone. I'll never get those back. That right hook just took 300 brain cells from me, and I wasn't willing to pay the price anymore for what it took. So to answer your question, I was no longer willing to pay the price to do what it takes to compete at that level.
It's got to be incredibly tough. I mean, I watched the UFC 261 a few weeks ago with Jorge Masvidal getting absolutely knocked out in the second round right after he almost like taunted Usman. And just there's this photo on ESPN of just the punch hitting his face, all the sweat, and he was knocked out cold, got back up. But I can't imagine taking that beating over a 20-year career.
Well, I've been trying to think, Austin, about RB's question.
Yeah, and
I think that's what it comes down to, the trade-offs.
Yeah, and this is something that we discussed in episode 1 about opportunity cost.
Yeah,
in life, like, I think we've all been through moments when we're told, all right, can't do this anymore, or we don't want you anymore. But do you kind of owe it to yourself sometimes to own that decision and take ownership of saying enough when it is enough, and kind of being selfish, which is, I think, a theme that we've discussed a little bit on this podcast.
Who are we?
Just 2 guys who probably shouldn't have started a podcast.
I was thinking about what you said about, being let go and how you were kind of forced out.
Listen to episode 3 if you haven't heard that story.
And, part of me questions, well, why'd you stay if you weren't happy? But that's neither here nor there, right? Because,
well, I can tell you. I mean, part of it is financial because, the company that...
Those golden handcuffs.
Well, another listener of this podcast, Justin, we had a conversation. Actually, he gave me a book, The Coddling of the American Mind, and I have not read it yet by the time you're listening to this, Justin. But when we had the conversation, I kind of alluded this to him because I think I was kind of previewing what this topic would be. And I think part of it is, we worked in the energy sector, and generally the energy sector pays more than other careers. At least that's the perception that I had until you actually go out there in the market and you see, okay, is this a competitive salary? Am I being used as a means to an end? And I think part of it for me was fear of the unknown. Because I had worked in sports prior to joining the energy sector. And in sports, the last job that I had, I made $1,061 a month. And that's below minimum wage if you factor in the hours that I worked. Yeah.
Wow.
Louisiana Tech University. Worked about 70 to 100 hours a week, depending on what season or what sport was going on, 7 days a week.
But you love sports.
I did, but that's why I no longer work in sports. And I've had a lot of people ask me, like, why don't you go back? And that's one of the reasons. For me, that was enough. I was able to see it, understand it, but I knew at the age of 22, 23, if I wanted to have any sort of work-life balance, sports was not in my card. So I started looking at the corporate world. And when you go from making, I think I equated it, I think I did the math, and I think it was like $3.47 an hour. That's what it came out to. You make that little of money trying to pay back student loans, And then you have an opportunity to work in the energy sector where they tell you, all right, you're going to make this much money. Here's what your benefits are, your 401k. I think sometimes you value that over the happiness that you have in the workplace. And I think that maybe contributed to an unhealthy mindset on my part.
And think about how that rolls downhill with everything else in your life.
It impacts everything.
Right? Everything else in your life was impacted by it. I'm sure, your health suffered, relationships suffered, how you may see yourself suffered as well, if you weren't necessarily happy.
Because, one of the questions going through my mind is like, all right, didn't get this expat opportunity, didn't get this role that I wanted or something like that.
Promotion.
Because that's one of the, I think the negative things in the organization that we were in is there wasn't a lot of opportunities for growth. And you're always told, be patient. And I was always patient. And I don't think I fought for myself enough. And that's okay, because I learned that now, like that I have to look out for number one. And even though that decision was made for me to leave, it was probably the best thing that could have happened.
I think before we were talking about this, I said sometimes we go with the wind, and then sometimes we are the wind. Right? We have to be willing to take that step. When we really do an assessment of, what are the trade-offs that I'm making, or will I have to make if I take this promotion? Am I going to be committed to this role for another 2 years or 3 years or however long? And where does that put me? Can I start a family? I'm one of those people, one of those men who would love to be a stay-at-home dad. Absolutely. I've mentioned it to many of the women friends in my life, and they're always taken aback. Like, they're surprised that I'd be willing to want to leave the workforce and spend time with my children. I'm like, yes, because I value that.
I know that you value that when your son, comes down here during the summertime and you get to spend the time hiking, reading, playing Call of Duty, things like that with him.
His development is very important to me.
Yeah, and he's at the age right now where he values that time. Mm-hmm. I think that's incredible. It's funny you mentioned stay-at-home dad, because I think for the people listening to this podcast, a lot of people probably don't want you to do that, because one of our Patreon subscribers, Arturo, he actually sent me a text message after listening to the first episode of the podcast, and he was like, DeRae needs to run for Congress. So I think the listeners of this podcast, maybe they want to see you be a stay-at-home dad in Washington, D.C. who happens to go into, I
don't know that
Congress
would be a thing for me, quite honestly, simply because of the gridlock. So I would already know, like, I'm not willing to make those trade-offs. Now,
RB, who's in the chat right now, she says, yes, you've had enough. She's making that decision for you.
Yes. State and local level politics where things happen, absolutely.
But that's the thing, is when, I think a lot of people, when they think politics, they think that everything happens at the national level. But no, if you really want to create change, and if you've had enough of what's going on in your country, in your community, it starts at the grassroots. Yep. It starts in the communities. That's where change starts. And it's okay if you're not the president of the United States. If you're a school board member and you're making a positive impact in your community, that's a win. That's a huge win.
We will have a whole episode about education, because
and I can't wait.
Very passionate about education.
Can't wait.
But definitely at the state and local level is where it's at. More folks, if they understood how we're trapped in this time where we really should be to a point where we've had enough with how our children are educated. The food we feed them, the food we eat for ourselves, and how we prioritize things, even mental health, right? In corporate America is just now kind of getting visibility, right? Where people would trade that off and make those sacrifices and be unhappy in those roles.
So I'm kind of curious. I think when RB submitted this topic, in my mind, I kept on thinking of the chase, right? Ooh. Like, how do you set these lofty goals, these aspirations? And if you meet these goals, then you continue to push and say, all right, I need to get to this goal. You aim higher. It's not, you look at Elon Musk. he could have just taken his buyout from PayPal and called it quits, call it a day, lived a happy life and retired. Instead, he decides to start Tesla and SpaceX. And instead of just, sending someone to space, he wants to colonize Mars. So at what point is, knowing that it's okay to kind of, balance those aspirations, but also realizing like I've already accomplished a lot. Like I'm satisfied, saying you're satisfied, but not being complacent. Like where is that? I feel like there's a fine line between those two, if that makes sense.
You know what there is. And I think I'm a parent. So, and also Austin, I suffer from the disease of more. Okay. I always.
Is this a diagnosable disease?
I'm self-diagnosed in that, I always want to push myself, and I'm just curious. I'm just curious to see what I can't do. I want to go figure that out. Because when I tell my son that he can do anything, I want to freaking mean it. Right? I want to freaking mean it. That when I tell my son or I tell my grandchildren or I tell anyone or I encourage anyone to go out and chase after whatever it is they're passionate about or whatever they're really good at, I want to not only talk the talk, but I want to walk the walk.
And I think it's okay to evolve over time.
Absolutely.
You could be 40, 50 years old, and if you want to learn how to play guitar, do it. If you want to quit your job, go travel the world and experience culture, cuisine, conversation, human connection. Do it. What's stopping you? What's holding you back?
Fear.
Episode 3. I swear we're not going to tie back every single episode.
But to know when there's enough, it's really a personal choice, right? When you're ready to call it a day and say, been there, done that, got the T-shirt. I deployed to Afghanistan, and I don't ever want to go back. I'm exiting the military because I've had enough, right? I've had enough of the culture. I've had enough of the stress. I've not been home, 365 days of the year, 12 years. 12 years. I've spent at least, a month or two away from work, away from my son, away from my friends, away from my family, and no longer willing to make that trade-off either. So, we had questions in our last episode that we should ask ourselves. And, the question we keep coming back to is, am I willing to make those trade-offs? And then also asking yourself, what do you desire most? If this is no longer what you desire most, well, now it's time to ask yourself, what do I desire most next?
And your goals can change over time. Your aspirations can change over time. You can develop new passions over time. But I think in order to do that, you have to know who you are. Not what society tells you that you have to be.
Yeah. Start with you.
Yeah. Focus on yourself.
That's right. What do I want?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of going back to the initial questions, and this is sort of what we alluded to a few moments ago, but do we mindlessly chase to get to this abstract idea of enough?
Hell yes. People do. You see them doing it all the time. On the hamster wheel, they're racing around. They're sitting in Houston traffic, wasting time. And it's so wild is that people will, just why are you chasing this stuff? The money is even made up, and I'm in business school, right? Studying money and how this stuff works, and I'm like, well, this stuff's all made up anyway.
Except Dogecoin, that's going to the moon.
We do. We chase these ideals. We chase these things we think we want, and at the end of the day, they don't necessarily mean anything. I think to keep everything in perspective, remember that you're going to die.
Yeah,
and don't get to your deathbed. There are plenty of stories out there where people are on their deathbeds and they're wishing they would have done this, that, or the other. Don't be that person. Ask yourself those questions right now, right? Decide what you want to do right now. Say, you know what? I've had enough of this. And you can be tactful about it, right? You don't have to just say, I quit, I'm out of here. Or, a relationship, you don't have to just ghost someone. If you're in that relationship for too long, sit down and have that conversation. Lean into everything, right? Take ownership of it's your life. You get to make those decisions. You are the executive CEO.
Live it to the fullest. If you're listening to this podcast right now, if you were to die tomorrow, would you feel that you lived a fulfilled life? Would you feel that you left anything out there that was unaccomplished? What have you left undone? Is there anything out there, DeRae? Or, I mean, obviously you keep moving the bar, and I think that's something we should all do. We should all push that bar forward and continue to grow personally, professionally, with our friends, family. If this is our last podcast, I mean, do you feel fulfilled with what you've accomplished in life?
I have a vulnerable moment here with you, Austin. My son, my heir, my golden child, he's 12 now. And I didn't have a mother. I didn't have a relationship with my mother, and he's gotten to do that. And her and I are, really good friends. But, he's in Colorado and I'm here in Texas. So I don't get to be there in the trenches with him every single day as he develops. And admittedly, like any other co-parent, I will overcompensate. So one of the things that I think about often is just, am I doing it right? Am I being there for him enough? Does he know how much I value him and care for him and want to see him succeed? And I don't want to be the helicopter parent that pushes him over the edge and he just, resents me there. But I also want him to be fearless, because I don't want him to adopt a frame of mind where he thinks he can't do something.
Have you thought about moving to Colorado to be closer to him, or maybe encouraging him and his mom to move to Texas?
Absolutely. I lived in Colorado and I moved to Texas to pursue, everything that I wanted in life, growing up in places where there are very homogenous populations and they weren't extremely diverse. I wanted to choose the city that I moved to. I chose Houston, Texas. Could have been, Kuala Lumpur, or, sitting on Denpasar in Bali or something. I don't know. Could have gone anywhere in the world, but I wanted to be here in Houston so my son could get to me in a direct flight whenever he wanted to. But definitely, and I still, to this day, we've probably talked about it a few times during COVID when everyone's working from home. Hey, what do you think about Houston? But he'll be flying. He'll be flying as an adult pretty soon, and he can just zip to wherever I am a lot more often. And he's going to need me now more than ever. But when you ask me, that's one of the things that I think about, where maybe I'm falling short, but the time that we do get to spend together, it's like we didn't miss a beat. But it's in the trenches, right? It's where his mother is when he doesn't want to do his homework or he gets an attitude. Because when he's with me, it's like, this is a treat. This is fun.
It's like when you go see your grandparents.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, for example, Katie's niece and nephew, they're 3.5 years old and probably 1.5 years old. And they're a lot of fun, but, sometimes they can get pouty. And, for us, we can see them when they're having a good time and then, leave. And the parents, they're with them 24/7. So they see the highs, they see the lows. It's something that I think we're going to discuss on upcoming episodes regarding, family. And, I was very fortunate to grow up in a household with, 2 parents, that did what they could. They didn't have like some magical degree or
there's no such thing, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have formal college education, and that's okay. They still provided and did what they could to make sure that I could live my dreams. And I think seeing what you're doing in your life, the decisions that you've made, I think maybe I'm just speculating, but I think you have understood where you've come from, and you're trying to make sure that your son has a life that is fulfilled, and that you're giving him opportunities maybe that you didn't necessarily have, but you're still encouraging him to work and to chase after his dreams, to read, to have that inquisitive mind.
He's an insatiable reader, and it's not just him. It's his children and their children and the children after that, because I understand how all this stuff works, and we're a bit behind, and that's okay. I wear that as a badge of honor and take that challenge on. I haven't had enough of that yet, so I'm going to keep on keeping on. But other folks, it's okay to rebrand, to pivot,
Yep.
to move into something else that you're curious about. That is really why you need to ask yourself, what do I desire most? Like, what am I curious about? Anything that you do, if you love it and it turns into a job, eventually you're going to love it less. I promise you.
We go back to the video. We go back to the video example that I mentioned on episode 3. You know, I started filming travel videos because I didn't want to post 300 photos on Facebook after a trip. I wanted to edit a 2 to 3 minute clip for my friends, highlighting our experiences. And because I did a good job at that, and I knew how to work a camera, the company that we worked for said, "Hey, you're going to do this now." And it got stale.
Yeah.
You know, I guess kind of a regret that I have is the last 2 trips, major trips that I took to Taiwan and to Australia. When we were in Taiwan, took tons of footage, captured tons of footage. Didn't feel like editing a video because I was burnt out and tired of doing it. Australia, I think the first day we were there, I took a camera with me, filmed stuff, didn't bring the camera back with me for days 2 through 8 of that trip. And I think part of it was for work. And I think I let a passion of mine be turned into a task, a job. And it took away the happiness. And so, yeah, do I regret maybe not having amazing footage of the Australia trip? Sure, absolutely. I still have the memories, still took photos, that kind of thing, but it's not the same thing. Do I eventually want to go back and edit that Taiwan footage and turn it into a 2-minute clip? Absolutely. Am I going to do it? Yeah, I have to. I mean, reinvigorate that passion or find that passion again.
I mean, that's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
But it starts and ends with you as to whether or not you've had enough. And there are circumstances, right? There's nuance and context. I mean, you have a family you have to take care of. You can't just up and quit your job.
Right.
And we're not suggesting that by any means. Or you shouldn't just up and leave your spouse. You know, therapy is important. So important. I was with an executive coach. He gave a lecture to my cohort, and he said, you know, I don't take on an executive unless I have had conversations with their therapist, their nutritionist, and their trainer. And so it's like a team of folks that come together. So you want to explore all the avenues before, and I'm speaking about a relationship necessarily, right? Because there's therapy involved, and people change over time. That person you married, 10 years ago is not that same person. They've changed. There's someone else now. And hopefully you two have grown together, but really ask yourself, what do you desire most?
I think part of that is also surrounding yourself with a group of trusted advisors, mentors, people who are going to give you honest feedback, who want to see you succeed and are going to empower you to find that way to succeed. Maybe not enable bad habits.
That's a really good point that you bring up. It's so important to have advocates. And you mentioned Justin earlier.
Yeah.
Especially, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever your cause, you need advocates. I consider anyone who comes into an organization or wants to get something done, they're like a running back, right? If we use like a football analogy.
Oh, you're talking my language.
And advocates are like the O linemen who are making the hole, right?
Yep.
So you need advocates. Otherwise, without an O lineman, there is no hole.
I mean, I don't care if you're Barry Sanders. I mean, if you're going up against a front four with no offensive line or an offensive line of 180-pound guys, Barry Sanders is going to get crushed.
Yeah.
But when they understand their assignments and their coverages, they work together. I mean, there's a reason why quarterbacks and running backs buy the offensive lineman dinner all the time. Because if the quarterback's successful, if the running back's successful, it's because of the offensive line.
And those are your advocates.
Yeah.
And Justin was my very first advocate in that organization and always pushed me to get out there and meet new people and try new things. And I'm appreciative for the blocking.
Here's an interesting fact. So I mentioned that Justin and I met a few weeks back for for beers at Carbach Brewery here in Houston. And we I don't know, we chatted for probably about 2.5+ hours, and it was just a great conversation.
Sorry, I missed that.
Well, we decided that we're gonna do it again. We're gonna have him on the show. We're gonna do sort of a I don't know, like a lot, maybe not a live show, but record there, and do it outside. Maybe it's not Carbach, maybe it's somewhere else, but yeah,
this is news to me.
Yeah, I mean, we're volunteering you. We're volunteering your time, DeRae. But I figured that, this would be something that you might be interested in. But
oh yeah,
we could figure
absolutely.
it out.
I love Justin.
Yeah, but point is, I think that we're trying to make, surround yourself with people that aren't just yes people, that are people that are going to tell you when you've had enough. Maybe sometimes you can be blind to it.
Yes.
You could have tunnel vision.
Such a good point.
And then other people are like, hey, take a step back, evaluate the situation. Are you sure this is what you want to do?
Yeah, that's
my TED Talk.
I can see that being everything, whether it's a relationship or professional, or you're writing a book. But you shouldn't write a book because you want people to read it.
You should write it because you have a story to tell.
Or
people should hear.
You want to write a damn book. That's it. Or you want to start a damn podcast. We started a podcast not because we wanted people to listen necessarily, but
we wanted to have conversation. Because I mean, even if nobody listens,
yeah,
I hope that I get, the opportunity to learn something from this. But RB, you're on the line right now. You came up with this topic. What's your takeaway? Do we get it right? Is there something we left down? Are there any questions that we haven't covered? And I'm gonna take off my headset right now because DeRae did not bring his headset, so he'll be able to hear RB.
I'm a rookie.
But RB, let us know your feedback from this topic today.
You guys always nail it. I mean, I love to listen to you talk. I could listen to endless episodes of Cautious Coffee. I do think that you hit, a lot of points around enough. I don't know. It's just been something rolling around in my brain for a while. The takeaway for me is that, even as society or circumstance is defining what enough might be for you, stand in your own truth and, and push back and redefine that for yourself. And, there's always a silver lining out there. And I think you just have to be willing to, use some elbow grease or spit shine that up and, and make it pretty. But, some of that dirty, nitty gritty, ugly, hard, difficult stuff, that's really what life's about. And that's really, it's worth letting something just be enough. I put in the chat, and I will say, I think that, you guys should do part 2 to this episode and really take a deeper dive in being that advocate and, and what is being a good friend and being that one who's willing to push back, and what is being a good partner, and, what does that look like, and, and how does enough play into that? So I'm just going to plug that for those of us who are, those channels.
Well, I absolutely love that idea.
Thank you, RB.
I absolutely love that idea. And RB, thank you so much for the feedback and thank you so much for the topic today. And I think that's fun. We can game plan all we want on potential topics, and then we can have listeners give us insights and just lead to great conversations. And I really do like the Patreon only bonus episode, if you will. And I think DeRae and I will definitely do that for the Patreon subscribers. But great conversation, DeRae, and it's always a pleasure to have these chats with you and to gain a new perspective, new idea. And we hope that you enjoyed this episode. So we want to hear from you. Let us know, what is enough? When is enough? We'll post these topics on social media, but let us know on social media. Again, you can find our channels, cautiouscoffee.com. Leave it on an iTunes review. That'd be super, super helpful. Helps with the YouTube algorithms. It helps with everything, iTunes algorithms. But again, RB, thank you so much for joining us on the subscribers only, I guess, Zoom line. So she's actually getting to see this live. If you were listening to this right now, you were listening to this episode probably about 2 or 3 weeks after the time that we recorded it. So if you want to be a part of the conversation as it happens, subscribe to us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/cautiouscoffee. And again, all the information is on cautiouscoffee.com. But DeRae, give us a final takeaway and send us home.
RB brought up a good point about society pressing on you. And when it does, I encourage you to simply opt out or reject what society has impressed upon you. Whatever ideals society, and I say that with finger quotes, believes you should be doing or should be thinking or should be reading or should be listening to, just say no. It's a whole complete sentence.
On that note, we hope you've had enough of
Until
this
next
episode of
time.
Cautious Coffee.
Until next time.
We'll see you next time.